So recently I started developing my applications in TypeScript more and more, and maybe if you're watching this video as a developer, you're familiar with it. This video is also aimed at developers, but still TypeScript was not really used in WordPress. But it makes developing applications that are built with JavaScript or I would say TypeScript so much more easier. The developing experience is so robust, it's fast. I think it's a great way to build applications with, but how do you combine it with WordPress? In this video, I'll be going to create a simple plugin, and in the setup, I will show you how how you can use TypeScript with WordPress and how you can have a great development experience with it with some modifications of scripts that WordPress already provides. All right, enough introduction and let's go to the body of this video. So just a small introduction. If you're not familiar with TypeScript, what is it? According to their own site, it's JavaScript with syntax for types. And it basically means that types are now supported in JavaScript, or now supported already a long time, but TypeScript adds support for types, meaning that you can declare what types your variables are. In the end, TypeScript will compile to plain JavaScript, but this will greatly enhance the developing experience. And I will be showing in the code later what it actually means to define types. There are a lot of courses also on TypeScript. The purpose of this video is not also explaining TypeScript in full detail, but how to get it running with WordPress. Nevertheless, it's good to know what we're dealing with, and it's a great way to develop applications, especially large-scale applications. Before we start developing, make sure that you're running more or less the same environment as me. I'm using Windows, but obviously you can also using Mac, and I will be just showing the tools I'll be using to code along in this video. You will needing local. And local is a development tool for WordPress, which makes it really easy to create WordPress websites hosted at your own computer, so to say. And well, you can just download it from their site. It's pretty straightforward. Pick a platform, and well, you have to leave your details, and you will get a link to local, and you will get an installer, and you can just install it. So if you don't have local yet, pause this video and install it. Furthermore, you need to have Node installed at your computer. It can be found at nodejs.org. And then in the download section, you can pick one of the binaries or installers you want for any platform. Again, if you have Windows, there is an easy installer. There's also an installer for Mac. And if you are using Linux, you probably already have Node installed or know how to install it. And at last, for writing my code, I'm using Visual Studio Code, which is, I think, one of the best IDEs or integrated development environments for writing code. I really love it, and it is also built-in support for TypeScript, so it makes even the development experience a lot greater. So if you have installed these dependencies, so local, which you can get on local, wp.com, Node, and Visual Studio Code, we can start booting our first WordPress website and then start coding. So open up local. I'll be opening it up again. And I have added a website here, which I called Sandbox. Obviously, adding a website in local is easy. You can just add your name, define a location, and then continue following the steps. Probably need to make another video about that later. But using local, I set up a local WordPress environment, which is also available in here. So this is actually my local, my sandbox in here, and it's available under the local URL. As you can see, I'm now viewing the plugins, and that's also what we were going to do we'll be creating a new plugin that has TypeScript support baked in. So in your editor, create a new folder that is located in the plugins folder of your WordPress, of your local WordPress installation. Again, if you want to go to the actual file location of this locally running environment, just click, and it will open up the location of the files in your Explorer or Finder. Nevertheless, I'll be moving to the coding part. I've opened up my editor and also opened up my terminal. You can hit Control tilde and it will open up the terminal. As you can see, I'm here in this plugins folder, and I've created a new folder called WP TypeScript. And in this we will be creating our new plugin that supports TypeScript. So the first thing we need to do is create a new PHP file so that WordPress knows what kind of plugin is in there. You can give this a similar name as your plugin slug, which in this case is wp-typescript, or you can also call the file index.php. Doesn't really matter. And in this we'll be start writing PHP. And to tell WordPress that this is a plugin, we need to add a couple of predefined items in the comments. We are writing a PHP comment now, as you can see, and that is plugin name. We call it WordPress with TypeScript, and you can give an optional description. This is a new amazing plugin, and give it a version. And furthermore, you could add an author and author license and so forth. So there's a whole section about this in the WordPress codex, so I won't go into this further because I want to focus on the TypeScript part. So the second step we want to take is initialize our packages, and we can do this by going to our command line. So I always use the hotkey Control tilde, but there are obviously other ways to do this. You can also go to your file explorer on the left and click on open in integrated terminal, and it will also open up the terminal. So the first thing we need to do is init our packages, and we can do this by writing npm init, providing you have a node installed. So this will walk you through a wizard. I'll just use WP TypeScript as package name, version 1, description, WordPress with TypeScript. The entry point is actually not really relevant, so we can just hit enter. We're not going to do any testing. It won't be linked to any Git. Q is we ignore. Also, you could add an author, but you could also add a license if the software is licensed. And this will give an overview of what we need. And if this is okay, just hit enter again. And there we are. As you can see, our package.json is now formed, and this will hold all the modules. So all the dependency scripts we need. And that's where we are getting to the fun part, because there are a couple of dependencies we need to install. And there's a really interesting dependency from WordPress. It's called @WordPress/scripts, and this is used by WordPress itself, by within the Gutenberg editor, or actually within the development process for developing custom blocks in Gutenberg to bundle your scripts. So it's the script bundler from WordPress itself. And well, what it does is that it allows you to modify and bundle your assets. Under the hood, it uses Webpack, which you may be familiar with, but basically it allows you to write modern JavaScript, and the script bundler will bundle all these modern JavaScript files, converts them to a format that is well understood by all browsers, and also bundles them together in a single entry point. We will see this script in action, as it is a very useful script, and we will be building on top of the base of the script and incorporate TypeScript support in it. And I think this is a great package. It makes developing, it makes tooling with JavaScript and WordPress a lot easier, and you don't need to set up a whole custom Webpack configuration. And again, if you want to know more about Webpack, if you're just new to this, there are a lot of videos and articles already about it. But since we're talking about TypeScript, I assume you're already a bit familiar with it. So for this project, we actually need 3 dependencies. And the first dependency we need is add WordPress scripts, and we need to save this as a development dependency. All right, that took some time, but this dependency is now installed, and you can also see it's added to the dev dependencies in here. We need to install 2 other dev dependencies, and by the way, there's a useful shorthand for install. We can also use npm I, and then just hit -d with a capital D to indicate this is a dev dependency. And there are 2 dependencies we need to make TypeScript work, and that is the TS loader package and also TypeScript itself. So let's hit it. So this was way faster, and as you can see, TypeScript and TS loader are now added as a dev dependency, and our node modules folder is already quite full with a lot of dependencies. And nevertheless, we have now formed the basis to start extending our configurations and developing. So the first thing I want to do is add 2 scripts in our package.json. There's now a test script which is not doing anything. We want to have a build script which will build our scripts and make it ready for production use. And because we have installed add WordPress scripts as a dev dependency, we have access to all add WordPress scripts functionalities, and among this is the wp-scripts build functionality, and this command will actually build all your scripts according to a certain configuration. And we can also start our development process by using the start command from WP scripts, which is really helpful during development. And there we are, we added those 2 scripts, and what it will do, we will see later in the video. Because now I will be creating a new folder, and folder structure hierarchy is always thing what's the best way to structure your folders. I didn't find the holy grail yet, but usually you want to use a public folder for all of your public modules, and then a source module in which your source code is placed, which can be PHP code, but in this example we'll mainly be using TypeScript and JavaScript code. So we'll be creating a plain TypeScript in here, which we will be adding code to it later, and this will be the entry point of all of our scripts. So this, if we now hit npm start, let's see what happens. Well, we started our development server, but we get this message: no entry file discovered in the source directory. And we can also see that there is this folder automatically generated by WordPress, which is called build. But in this case, we're using public, and we have this message that no file is discovered in the source directory, while we have this script.ts. So how can we make WordPress look for the correct file? Well, for this we need to extend the current configurations of WordPress by adding a Webpack.config. So here we are, I've added a Webpack.config. And this file will tell the bundler. In this case, we're using WordPress scripts, but WordPress uses Webpack under the hood. So this will be the entry point for all our configurations. This will tell Webpack what to do with the scripts. And the great thing is that we can just include the default settings from WordPress in it and then extend it. So if you're ready for it, let's code along. We'll be needing the path module from Node to resolve our paths, and we also need to load our default configuration from the WordPress scripts module. And for that, we will just be loading them directly from the module. And these configurations are placed in the following folder. You can actually put the file extension behind it, but it's not strictly needed. So by requiring this file, we're now making the default configurations from the WordPress scripts dependency available in this Webpack config, but we still need to put them in this configuration. So how do we do that? It's pretty easy. You can use the ES6 spread operator for it, which will pull out all configurations from the defaults constant. And there we are. Basically what we have in here is the same as what is placed in here. But what we can do now is actually overwrite a couple of the parts of the config by explicitly declaring them in this object. So if I add entry point, I can add an entry point, and WordPress is actually using the same build-up for its entry point, but we'll be changing to a different path. And in this case, it will be the source path, and we will be looking at scripts.ts. So for this, we need the path module. We need to do path resolve, process CBD. And then hit our source folder, and then our entry point, which in this case is script.ts. And there we are, we changed the entry point. And now WordPress will be looking for script.ts. Now let's go to the following step and changing our output. For the output, we want to have it placed in our public folder instead of the build folder. For the file name, we'll just be taking the name of the original file, for which we can use these square brackets and use name. And what this will do is it will take the original name, so this script.ts. In this case, it's script, and it will become script.js. And for the path, we'll be again doing the same as we did in the entry point. And we'll be using public. So any of these scripts found in the entry point will be put in the public folder, and it will follow the file name. It will follow the following file name setup. So we're done for the entry and the output now, but we also need to add a couple of rules and resolvers so that Webpack can actually apply the correct loader to our TypeScript files, and also look for the correct extensions. So for this, we need to add a couple of values to the module property, and because we're overwriting this section, we need to get our defaults in here using the spread operator, and then we are going to add a few custom rules. And again, you need to load our default rules using the spread operator, and we'll be adding a new rule to the array of rules, which is testing for TypeScript files. I'm using a simple regular expression that matches TS or TSX files. So this expression this matches both TS and TSX, which is used in React components, React combined with TypeScript, very neat. Nevertheless, we also need to apply a loader on it, and for this we installed the TypeScript loader dev dependency. We can find our loader in here, and also define which options we want to attach to this loader. And this is pretty nice because it allows to add a custom configuration file for our TypeScript, which we'll be adding any moment later. We'll be already pointing to this configuration file anyway in this code, and we'll set transport only also to true. So you can leave out this option if you want to have a larger build time, because what transport only does, it will leave out the type checking during build. But since we are already using type checking in our Visual Studio code on the run while writing code, we technically don't need it here because our code will already be checked when writing. But if you still want to turn on type checking, you need to set this to false or remove this value. Nevertheless, we need to add a couple of other rules to our Webpack.config. Now that we set up the loader for TypeScript, it's also time to resolve the necessary paths. It's also necessary to add a resolver for the TypeScript extensions. And we'll just be expanding this array with .ts and .tsx, and also looking if we have some default extensions in our resolver. So let's look if we have anything in our defaults. Then we'll be getting these extensions. Otherwise, we'll be defaulting it to JS and JSX, and otherwise it will be an empty array. So there we are, our webpack.config is finished, and now we'll be moving on to adding a TypeScript configuration file, which needs to be named tsconfig.json, and this will be in the JSON format. And in this we can define the compiler options for TypeScript, and in the TypeScript documentation you will find a lot of background information on this configuration. But for now we'll be using the following specification. We'll be declaring our exit point, which is not technically needed since we already declared it also in the Webpack configuration file, but also the TypeScript configuration needs to know. We'll adding support for React, GSX files. We're using ESNext as a module. And our target will be, yes, 2015, or whoops, which will still support some of the older browsers. We'll be developing in strict mode and allow, and our model resolution will be in Node. So this allow synthetic default imports is pretty useful if you want to write imports and make import statements more easily in our code. So what it basically does is that this allows import package from. It allows us to do this instead of doing this. So now our TS config is finished, and let's restart our script by hitting Ctrl+C to exit the process and hitting npm start. So there we are. The anti-prone source scripts.js is used, and we can delete the old build folder for now. And in public, we can see the script.js is generated, and it's neatly wrapped into an EFFE. And there's also a PHP file generated. This file does that it automatically adds a version every time you modify your script. This version is changed, and it also set up any of the dependencies that are needed for running scripts. It's pretty useful, and you'll be seeing in a moment why it's useful. We need to link to this file in our code. If we want to use a script, we also need to link it. So let's go back to our index.php file, and in this case, I assume you're going to use the script on the front end of WordPress, and we still need to enqueue the script, so it's recognized by WordPress, and for that we use the wp enqueue scripts action, and we'll be adding a function to it. For testing or debugging purposes, it's not always the best case to use anonymous function, but in this case I will be using an anonymous functions. And first what we will do is load our script argument from the file that was just generated by WordPress by @WordPress /scripts. So the file we just looked at. We can just use the following code. Assets. Oh no, it's in the public folder. Public, and then scripts.assets. And then we can enqueue our script. Well, just call it like this, and our source will be, you can use the helper function plugins URL for it, and just add public, which is basically, and then add the file constant to the function. And this is basically the place where our script is located. Then the dependencies, well, that's where the magic kicks in. We can get from, so we can get the dependencies from our arguments. Dependencies, blah, blah, blah. Let me just look it up. Yeah, it's called dependencies. And similar for the version, we can also use in here version, and we probably want to enqueue this in the footer so it doesn't block loading the DOM. So this will enqueue our generated scripts in here, and well, I see I did a small mistake here with my explanation. If you go to webpack.config.js, In here, we'll be using the entry port scripts. And I believe this is taken as the name for the output. So to make it more following the structure of this whole setup, let's just change our script to scripts so it all now matches. And my IDE needs to do some recalculations, and let's run the start command again. And there it's again generated. And we're now ready to develop TypeScript and WordPress, and this is enough to start developing. I'll be explaining somewhat more about TypeScript. Now, if you're already familiar with it, you can just stop this video, and thank you for watching. So in short, what is the advantage of TypeScript? Let's just create a simple function in which you can see, of course, TypeScript goes a lot further than that, but this function add number A and B will just add a number. And as you can see, I already will get warnings, which I wouldn't get with regular JavaScript. So for sake of the exercise, I'll just be adding an example script, which will explain you the power of types. So imagine I'm creating the same function in here, A and B, and this will return A plus B. Now I can console log the function, and obviously I can add any number. So if I run this file in my editor, for this I'll be using nodemon. Yeah, if I'm running nodemon, it will output 5 like we expected. But in this example, we have two arguments, A and B. And these arguments are of the same type. So as you may know, in programming languages, you have types. And JavaScript support a lot of types such as booleans, integers, strings, and objects. But JavaScript is dynamically typed. And it's meaning that you can change the type during writing the code. So I could add a new variable. Implicitly, this is now a number, but then I could also make it a string, for example. And while this makes the language pretty flexible, it can result in a couple of bugs. And this is like the most simple and well-known example that will explain this to you. So what happens if we make one of these values a string? So this is now a string type, and this is a number. There we are. The result will now be 14 instead of 5. While these are both numbers, they're now of different types. This is a string and this is 4. And in the function we return A plus B. What JavaScript does is something called type coercion. It changes the type of B as well under the hood. And what it actually will do is do something like this. And well, this in the end is obviously is 14. Of course, we can write some checks in the function. So check if it's really a number or an integer, or convert A and B to a number. But this is really confusing syntax. As you can see now, our output is 5, because now they're both converted to numbers. But TypeScript is invented exactly for such kind of problems, and it goes a lot farther, because these are very simple types, but you can also apply this to much more complex types. And besides that, TypeScript also adds great functionalities for working with classes, generic types, and so forth. But let's go back to our TypeScript example. I will be exiting this monitor in here now. So what we would be doing, what if we're going to do the same thing in TypeScript? Well, this is the same function, and I already get a warning here that A and B are implicitly of any type. So of course it's possible, but in TypeScript you need to declare a type of your variables. And I can also do this. When declaring a variable, for example, I could just do this. And also give it a value. Whoops. Now, if I want to run this function with anything that is not a number, I'll get an error in my editor. And as you can see, argument of type string is not assignable to parameter of type number. So if I would make this a number, I get an error again because I'm assigning a string to something that needs to be a number. So in the end, if I change this to a number, this will now work out, and it will also compile. And that, in short, is the power of TypeScript. It allows for type checking and makes the development experience a lot nicer. It also adds auto-completion. So if I would add any other module, so module and then some object, some property, oh whoops, make it like this. It makes importing really easy. Imagine I want to import. Hop, there we are. We can now use module. But if you would make this example more relevant, some object. Of course, I can also and now if I want to import, if I want to use this object, I can just sit and it's imported. There we are. It's that easy. So this is also a thing I really like, this auto-completion feature with imports being used. So these are two things that make developing with TypeScript a breeze. And well, in the end, it still exports to plain JavaScript. So this is pretty similar to the function we wrote earlier, but during writing, it will check for errors. And this, in short, is the power of TypeScript. Now available at your fingertips in WordPress. So now that we did a lot of developing part on the editor side, how does it look on the WordPress side? So if I go to my local environment, log in and watch the plugins, I can see this plugin WordPress with TypeScript is now in here, and we can activate it. And if I look on the front end and inspect the source, I can see that also our script is enqueued, and there we are. We just set up a starter template for WordPress with TypeScript, and this allows us to create awesome, dynamic and interactive applications. So I hope this video has helped you to get the most out of WordPress and TypeScript. and start developing with TypeScript and WordPress. I hope support for types in WordPress and the blog editor will improve in the future, which will make it even more powerful. But for now, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them below, and happy developing.